بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رسولا ونبيا ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Continuing on with the Prophet ﷺ's legendary government military legacy, the era of the notorious Sayyidina Umar bin Al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, picking up from page number 323. And he quotes, "O Amirul Mu'mineen, give your companion the glad tidings of a boy." We are going into the different situations which Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab experienced in his night patrols. Whilst Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu was patrolling one night, he passed by one of the courtyards of Medina and saw a tent that had not been there the night before. He drew closer and heard the cries of a woman in labor. He saw a man sitting there, so he went to him and greeted him with salam. And asked, "Who are you?" He said, "I am one of the people of the desert, and I have come to Amir al-Mu'mineen to get a share of his bounty." He then asked, "What is this noise I can hear inside the tent?" He said, "May Allah have mercy on you. It is not your concern." He said, "Never mind, tell me what it is." He said, "A woman in labor." He asked, "Is there anyone with her?" He said, "No." So Umar went to his home and said to his wife, Kulthum bint Ali, "Do you want some reward that Allah has made easy for you?" She asked what it is. He said, a woman who is a stranger and is in labor and has no one with her. She said, "Yes, if you wish." He said, "Take with you whatever women need for giving birth of clothes and creams, and bring me a pot of some fat and grains." She brought those things, and he said, "Let's go." He carried the pot, and she walked behind him until they reached the tent. He said to her, "Go into the women." And he went and sat with the man and said to him, "Light a fire for me." He did that, and he put the pot on the fire until the food was cooked. The woman gave birth, and Umar's wife said, "O Amirul Mu'mineen, give your companion the glad tidings of a boy." When the Bedouin heard the words Amirul Mu'mineen, it was as if he got scared and he started to back away. Umar said to him, "Stay where you are." He took the pot and placed the pot at the door and said to the wife, "Let her eat her fill." So she did that. Then she brought the pot out and placed it by the door. And Umar got up and took it and placed it in front of the man and said, "Eat, woe to you, you have stayed up all night." And he said to his wife, "Come out." He said to the man, "Tomorrow come to us and we will give you what you need." The next day he came to him and he gave him a stipend, or he gave stipend to his son like any other Muslim child. "By Allah, I will not obey him in public and disobey him in private." This is another quote, another night patrol. It was narrated that Aslam, the freed slave of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, said, "Whilst I was with Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab as he was patrolling Medina, he got tired and leaned against a wall in the middle of the night. He heard a woman saying to her daughter, 'O my daughter, get up and mix that milk with water.' She said, 'O my mother, what about the decree of Amirul Mu'mineen?' She said, 'What was his decree?' She said, 'He commanded his caller to cry out, "Do not dilute milk with water." She said to her, 'O my daughter, get up and dilute that milk with water, for you are in a place where neither Umar nor his caller can see you.' The girl said, 'By Allah, I will not obey him in public and disobey him in private.' Umar radiallahu anhu heard all of that. Then he said, 'O Aslam, mark the door and remember where it is.' Then he carried on with his patrol. The next day he said, 'O Aslam, go to that place and see who said that and who said it to, or who they said it to, and whether they have a husband.' He went to that place and found a single girl with no husband, and the other woman was her mother who had no man. He came to Umar bin Khattab and told him, and Umar called his sons together and said, "Does any of you need a woman to marry? Any of you, in other words, ready to be married? If your father had an energy, none of you would beat him to this girl." Abdullah said, "I have a wife." Abdurrahman said, "I have a wife." Aslam said, "Oh, my father, I do not have a wife, so let me marry her." He sent for the girl and married her to Aslam. She bore him a daughter, and that daughter bore a daughter, and that granddaughter bore Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the fifth Khalifa, known better as the fifth Khalifa. Very interesting. His name is going to keep coming up, but because he was a direct descendant of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab. Interesting. Ibn Abdullah Hadi said, some of them said that this is how it is narrated in this report, but it is a mistake. The correct version is, she bore Aslam a daughter, and that daughter bore Umar ibn Abdul Aziz direct. Umar used to check on the people himself, and he would patrol at night and fulfill his duties toward the people, seeking the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His keenness to keep up to date with affairs in his state was not limited to the capital only. Rather, that concern extended to all regions of the Islamic State, as we shall see in the following pages, inshallah. 3.2.5 His kindness and compassion towards animals. Umar's kindness towards animals stemmed from his faith, which made him kind and compassionate towards everything. His heart had been softened by the remembrance of Allah, and he felt compassion towards all of Allah's creation. He learned from Al-Islam that in every living being there is a reward, and that it is not permissible in Al-Islam to abuse animals, to destroy them for no reasons, to use them in ways for which they were not created, or to force them to do more than they are able. Umar declared that if a mule stumbled in Iraq, he was responsible for not having the road paved. The following are some examples which will demonstrate that. Moving along now to page number 326, which are glowingly recorded in the Islamic history. Will you burden your camel with more than it can bear? It was narrated that Al-Musayyib ibn Darim said, I saw Umar bin Khattab beating a camel driver and saying, will you burden your camel with more than what it can bear? Do you not know that they have rights over you? Next one. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais said, we came to Umar bin Khattab, with news of great conquest, and he asked, where are you staying? I said, in such and such a place. He came with me until we reached the place where the animals were resting, and he checked them over and asked, will you not fear Allah with regard to these mounts of yours? Do you not know that they have rights over you? Why did you not let those sow, or why did you not them loose so that they could eat of the vegetation of the earth? So the mountain loose, why could you not let them loose, is what he meant, because he had them tied up. Subhanallah, excuse me. Treating Zakah camel, a delegation from Iraq, among whom was Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, came to Umar on a very hot summer's day. Umar had wrapped an abaya around his head like a turban, and was daubing one of the Zakah camels with pitch as a remedy. He said, O Ahnaf, take off your cloak and come and help the Amir al-Mu'mineen with this camel, for it is one of the Zakah camels, and it has the same rights as the widows, the orphans, and the poor. A man said, may Allah forgive you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why don't you tell one of the Zakah slaves to do that for you? Umar radiallahu anhu responded, what slave is more of a slave than me, or Al-Ahnaf? The one who is appointed in charge of the Muslims has the same duty towards them as a slave to his master, the duty of sincerity and fulfilling the trust. Next quote. An animal has been made to suffer because of Umar's wishes. Umar radiallahu anhu wanted some fresh fish, so Yarfa, his free slave, took a camel and traveled 2 days there and 2 days back to buy some fish and bring it to him. Yarfa went and washed the sweat from his mount. Umar looked at it and said, an animal has been made to suffer because of Umar's wishes. By Allah, Umar will never taste that fish. Next, I am afraid that I will be questioned about you. Umar saw a camel which appeared exhausted and sick. He went to it, he laid his hand on the camel's back and examined it, saying, I am afraid that I will be questioned about you on the day of judgment. These are some stories of Umar which demonstrate his kindness and compassion towards animals. Would that our confused youth would learn something that they would learn about in their history and about Islam, so that they would know that there is no human principle that benefits human society but Al-Islam, which has enjoined it and has explained it in detail. Then they would not be dazzled by the West, which boasts of its animal welfare societies as being one of the signs of its human principles. And our youth would not imitate the West, thinking that they invented such things. They should realize that we taught the West everything it knows about kindness to animals and everything that is beneficial. Remembering that Allah is always watching is the key to guidance and goodness, and is the essence of worship, even with regard to a sick camel. Umar feared that his Lord would question him about it. This is the essence of Al-Islam, awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jalla jalaluhu. As we move on to page number 328, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having it grow inside of the heart. Can any ruler succeed without this? Can he escape the reckoning of Allah? When has he been appointed in charge of his slaves? 3.2.6 Earthquake during the time of Umar bin Al-Khattab. There was an earthquake at the time of Umar bin Al-Khattab, and he said, O people, this earthquake is only because of some sins that you are committing. By the one in whose hand is my soul, if it happens again, I will never stay amongst you. Umar's concern for knowledge. The da'iyas and the scholars. Umar's concern for knowledge. Knowledge is one of the most important factors for the Muslim Ummah to prevail, because it is impossible to imagine that Allah will support an ignorant nation which does not seek knowledge. Anyone who studies Al-Quran will realize that it is filled with ayahs that give knowledge a high status and encourages us to seek it and acquire it. The first ayah of the Quran, which stipulates, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of your Lord who created you. All that exists is this Quran, Surah number 96, ayah number 1. The Quran also describes knowledge as the opposite of kufr, which is ignorance and misguidance. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says, say are those who know equal to those who know not. It is only men of understanding who will remember. Example, هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. Those who remember the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are only those who understand it. This is Quran, Surah number 39, ayah number 9. The only thing that Allah commanded His Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam to ask him for more of was knowledge. And he says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. This is Quran, Surah number 20, ayah number 114. The Sahaba understood that knowledge and understanding of religion are amongst the means of attaining divine help and support. Hence they were keen to understand their religion and to learn the word of Allah in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Their pursuit of knowledge was for the sake of Allah. They were also keen to learn the evidence for rulings, and they were certain that it is essential to act upon one's knowledge, otherwise Allah will take it away the blessing from it. The Sahaba learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam his dua, saying, O Allah, I seek refuge with you from knowledge that is not benefit, from the heart that is not humble, from the soul that is never satisfied, and from the prayer that is not answered. Allahumma ameen. The Ummah bore witness to Umar bin Khattab's greatness and his great knowledge, and the fact, the Ummah bore witness to Umar ibn al-Khattab's great knowledge and the fact that he was one of the faqihs of the earliest generation. Without parallel, he was known for the depth of his knowledge, his analytical ability, and his brilliance in reaching the right conclusions. This after the help and guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu qualified him for the prominent position. Thus Umar ibn Khattab became the faqih of the Muslims after he became Khalifa, and through his ijtihad he established, as we move on, he established principles of justice based on the core teachings of Al-Islam. Umar was one of the foremost faqihs of the Sahabas. The righteous Salaf praised his knowledge and understanding and his precise knowledge of Sharia rulings. Umar radiallahu anhu was cautious in accepting ahadith, and he discussed various issues of knowledge with the Sahabas. He would ask the Sahabas about matters that he had not learned from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He encouraged the pursuit of knowledge and would check on people to encourage them to learn. He made Medina a center of fiqh and fatwas, and it became a school from which governors and judges graduated. He prepared a select group of the Sahabas to lead institutes of learning, the masajids in the conquered regions as well, where they taught and educated the conquered peoples in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Thus he laid the foundations for the schools which had such an effect on the people, on the Muslim citizens, such as the schools of Basra, Kufra, and Damascus, and he further developed the schools of Al-Madinah and Mecca. 4.1.1 His caution in accepting ahadith and his discussion of knowledge and asking about matters of which he was unaware. His caution in accepting ahadith and seeking confirmation. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari asked for permission to enter the place of Umar ibn al-Khattab, but he did not let him in, as if he was busy. So Abu Musa went away. Umar finished what he was doing and asked, "Did I not hear the voice of Abdullah ibn Qais? Let him in." It was said, "He has gone." So he called him and said, "We were commanded to do that." He asked Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, "Can you bring me proof of that?" So he went to a gathering of Ansar and asked them, and they said, "No one will testify about that for you but the youngest of us." Abu Sa'id stood up and said, "We were commanded to do that." Umar said, "I did not learn of that from the Messenger of Allah. I was too busy in the market." Example, going for trade. According to a report narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Qudri, he said, "I was in the gathering of the Ansar when Abu Musa came looking worried and said, 'I asked permission to meet Umar 3 times and he did not let me in, so I went away. He asked me what stopped me, and I said, I asked permission to enter and meet with you 3 times and I was not admitted, so I went away.' And the Messenger of Allah said, 'If any of you asks permission to enter 3 times and he is not admitted, let him go away.' And he said, 'You have to bring me proof of that. Is there any one of you who heard that from the Messenger of Allah?' Ubay ibn Ka'b said, 'By Allah, no one will go with you but the youngest of people.' I was the youngest of people, so I went with him and told Umar that the Prophet ﷺ had actually said that." Umar ibn al-Khattab discusses the knowledge and asking about matters of which he was unaware. It was narrated that Abu Hurairah said, "A woman who did tattoos was brought to Umar, and he stood up and said, 'I adjure you by Allah, who heard anything from the Prophet about tattoos?' Abu Hurairah said that he stood up and said, 'O Amir al-Mu'mineen, I heard something.' He asked, 'What did you hear?' He said, 'I heard the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, do not do tattoos or have them done.' It was narrated from Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah that Umar ibn al-Khattab consulted them about causing a woman to miscarry. Moving on now to page number 332, said that the Prophet ﷺ ruled that the one who does that should free a male or female slave. He said, "Bring someone who can testify with you." So Muhammad ibn Maslama testified that he saw the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pass such a judgment. It was narrated Umar was asked about a man who became junub whilst traveling and could not find water. He said he should not pray until he finds water. Ammar said to him, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, do not Do you not remember when you and I were riding camels and we became junub? As for me, I rolled on the ground like an animal, and as for you, you did not pray. I told the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about that, and he said, it would have been sufficient for you to do this. And he struck the ground with his hand and wiped his face and hands. Umar said to him, fear Allah, O Ammar. He said, if you wish, I will not speak of it. He said, no, we accept what you say. This was a sunnah that Umar had witnessed, but then forgotten until he ruled differently. Then Ammar reminded him, but he did not remember. He did not disbelieve Ammar, rather he told him to speak of it. 4.1.2 Saying of Umar encouraging the pursuit of knowledge. Umar said, if a man comes out of his house carrying a burden of sins like a mountain of Tihama, then when he hears some knowledge, he fears Allah and repents, he will go back home with no sins on him. So do not forsake the gatherings of the scholars. Inshallah, we will stop here and pick it up from page number 333. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسم ربك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.